Gilbert Arenas doesn't believe Bill Laimbeer could play in today's game, which is nuts. Absolutely nuts. You know how much money Bill Laimbeer would make in today's NBA? A stretch five that can block shots and rebound and be a starter on a two-time championship team and a starter on a team that made it to the finals 3 times. Gilbert Arenas does not know what he's talking about. I hate the memory, of what non-Pistons fans have of the Detroit Pistons of that era. Yes, dude, they were hard fouling, but so was every other team. I don't know why it's always placed on the Detroit Pistons, and the NBA does a terrible job of not telling the correct story of that Detroit Pistons team. I get so tired of the only highlights I ever see are them just throwing people to the floor. They were a good basketball team that played beautiful basketball, and we do not see it. And I hate the NBA for that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't really like to show the bad boys love because they interrupted the Lakers and the Celtics runs. But when I saw this, I was listening to his podcast, and he said that, and I'm like, I don't think he ever watched Bill Laimbeer play basketball. I think what he saw was just some YouTube clips, like you said. He doesn't play defense. He's just clotheslining people. He's following people. He said he couldn't play in today's NBA, which I find hilarious. Bill Laimbeer was the original stretch five. There's so many stretch fives in today's game. I mean, I think of Brook Lopez right away. Like, Bill Laimbeer and Brook Lopez are similar players. Now, Brook Lopez doesn't hammer people, but I'm sure if he was playing in Bill Laimbeer's era, he probably would have punched some people because he seems like he's about that life. But honestly, man, when I heard this, that he doesn't think Bill Laimbeer could play in today's NBA. He's not a good basketball player. And, the bad boys were just a dirty team and all stuff like that. Bill Laimbeer and Rick Mahorn and James Edwards were just clotheslining people when they got to the paint. I mean, that was the style of type of basketball in the 80s. The Celtics were doing it. And no one really called them out for being dirty. The Pistons started doing it, and everyone calls them dirty, and they're bad for basketball. I just don't understand it. I think it's a really bad take from Gilbert Arenas. I don't know if he's just trying to, get his name out there, be in the limelight. He's been away from basketball for quite a long time. He was a great player during his time, but, I mean, to say something so stupid and idiotic, it's just a bad look for him. Because to me, I think Bill Laimbeer in today's game would be great. He would be a stretch five. He would be I think of Ryan Anderson. I don't know if you remember him when he was in Orlando and he had a little run with the Pelicans. I mean, he was a stretch four. I mean, Bill Laimbeer could literally play in today's game and just pick and pop all day.
Well, yeah, he'd probably make close to $30 million a year. That's how valuable Bill Laimbeer would be in today's NBA. As a stretch five, being physical enough to bang with a Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, being able to do that type of stuff. Yeah, Bill Laimbeer could do all that in today's NBA. But it's hard for me to blame Gilbert Arenas for saying all he did was hack other players when the only highlights you see of Bill Laimbeer on YouTube are of that. I think all the blame goes on the NBA and them telling the history of the game. You're only telling one side. I know more about Bart Starr on accident than I do about why Jerry West was named the logo. You know what I'm saying? Because the NFL does a great job of remembering their legends and always putting them in front of you. That I know more about the NFL history on accident than I do about the sport that I love the most, because the NBA is just so bad at telling the story and, getting their legends out in front of you. I know nothing about these guys. So I don't blame Gilbert Arenas for saying Bill Laimbeer was, a dirty player and always hacking guys, because if that's all you've ever seen of Bill Laimbeer, that's exactly how you think he played basketball. We don't see any highlights of him draining threes or rebounding guys or, throwing a great outlet pass or posting someone up and making a move. They don't show any of that stuff of Bill Laimbeer. So I can't be angry at Gilbert Arenas for saying, yeah, well, this is what I've seen, and what I've seen of him wouldn't translate today's NBA. So it's a shame on the NBA. I'll keep saying that.
Well, it's a shame on him too. I mean, he's smart enough to go back and watch the games. I think it was more of him kind of, he slighted out Bill Laimbeer, but I think his big gripe is with all these players in the 1980s saying that, LeBron James couldn't play in my era and stuff stuff like that. I think it's more. He singled Bill Laimbeer out, but I think it's more on the players in the 1980s. He doesn't think that they could hang with his generation, and we always hear these conversations like, "Oh, you couldn't play in the 70s, you couldn't play in the 80s, you couldn't play in my generation." Like, I think it's just a tired conversation, and it's just former and current NBA players talking shit to each other at the end of the day.
I don't think every player from the 70s and 80s could play in today's NBA, but I think there's a handful of guys you could pick up how they played in the 70s and 80s. They could play in today's NBA. I think you could pick Jerry West up and put him in today's NBA, and he would still give you 23 or 25 a night. When I went back and watched, what was it, like the 72 finals when they played the Knicks, he was a step ahead of everybody. He looked like a modern day player out, like a today player playing in the 70 finals. Like that, I believe there are certain guys that you could just pick up and put in today's NBA and they'd be perfectly fine. I think you could pick up any NBA player from today's game and they'd be fine in any era of the NBA. I mean, they're just so skilled today. You can't tell me you don't, but I do think that there are certain guys from past eras that you could just pick up and they'd be all right. But again, I disagree with Gilbert Arenas.
Yeah, same here. I just think Bill Laimbeer kind of was just the first player that he thought of, and I was very surprised for him to say that because, like, if you watch Bill, he was kind of like revolutionary in terms of like you didn't really see a whole lot of centers, shooting 3-pointers, and he was like kind of like I don't want to say he was like the only stretch five during his era, but he was one of the very few that could actually knock down 3-point shots from beyond the arc.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't on a lot of attempts, but one year where he took 2 3-pointers a game, he made 36%. He didn't seem like, I mean, he did shoot 30% one year, then jumped it up to 38%. So the talent and the stroke was there. I think Bill Laimbeer would be fine.